Welcome to the next poetry video. This is a video about the work that we're going to be doing in the unit, and it's going to kind of lay out the assignments that you're going to be working on your own as we work in class about poetry. I thought this backdrop was pretty cool. It kind of suggests the character of poetry, and the music is Enya, which I think also fits. Okay, the point of poetry is that it drives into your heart instead of your head. So what that means is that what we're actually looking at, is how does this affect me? How does this speak to me? What images does it put? Rather than what information can I carry away from it? And we covered that a little bit in the previous video. Okay, in order to get that, to help you develop that, we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of assignments you're going to be doing in this short unit. If we're going to read and write and discuss poetry like a poet, then we need to be very familiar with the vocabulary. So you are going to have a vocabulary study that's pretty much on your own. We're going to be doing a lot of reading of poetry. We talked about that in the last video. And you're going to be having some assignments that we're going to work on together during focus time. One of the things you're going to do at the end of the unit is find a poem you love and prepare to read it out loud to the people in the class. You're also going to be writing some original poetry of your own. You're going to help as part of the workshop process. You're going to help do a peer feedback. And finally, when you feel like you have mastered the vocabulary terms, you're going to take a test on your own time. That's just an overview. Let me get specific about a couple of assignments. The first one is to learn the terms of the poet. This is all independent. It's on your time. It says in order to read, share, and write poetry, we need to have the language of the poet. We need to talk like a poet. We need to understand the tools of a poet. And in order to do that, I've given you a list of definitions. You're going to get a hard copy of this. This is linked to NiceNet, and it's also here on the video, so you can go back and look it up if you need to. Your hard copy should be glued into your ISN. There's some sites linked in link sharing under the poetry chapter that will take you to some sites that will give you some definitions. There's also some poetry reference books if you prefer hard copy. Once you've looked up the definitions, I expect you to learn them and be able to use them, be able to apply them by finding these elements in the poetry that we're reading and discussing, and to use it in your own poetry. But when you think you have the definitions down, then you can sign up to take a vocabulary test. And this is completely at your own pace, and you can take it anytime as long as it's done by a due date that we'll talk about in class. We'll set it together. Here is the vocabulary you're going to be looking up. It's 7 and 7 is 14 and 7 is 21 and 7 is 28, 29, 30. There's 32 terms here. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Some of them you've heard about. Nothing hard, but this is the vocabulary of the poet, and you will be expected to know what these terms mean. The second assignment you're going to have in this unit is to create a poetry journal for yourself. We're going to be reading a lot of poetry together in class, and you'll be reading and sharing poetry during work time. And while you're doing this reading, I would like you to create a collection of poems that moved you in somehow. Knocked your socks off, made you think, made you smile, made you laugh, connected to you on a personal level, maybe confused you in a way you couldn't figure out. Some poems that reached you more than others. So you're going to collect, there needs to be a minimum of 10 poems in this journal. Out of the poems that you've collected, you're going to choose your 3 favorite and write a journal entry. For each of these 3 poems, you're going to write why you like the poem, why it's one of your favorite out of all of them, or you can write about what the poem means to you. You need to be specific, give reasons and examples, and point out something specific in the poem. For example, if you found a metaphor in the poem, write it down and explain it. Or if there's a great image in the poem, show what it is. Okay, these poems may not be written by your peers or other unpublished, unknown authors, and it shouldn't be well known. It should be unknown. Usually poems on poetry.com sites will take anyone, and I don't want you reading amateur poetry. The unit is about quality poetry, and I want you to learn from the best. So the sites you're going to use are sites that end in .org, and I'll give you a list of those as well. You may not use poetry written for children. That means no Dr. Seuss, no Shel Silverstein, no Jack Pretlusky, no nursery rhymes, no tongue twisters. You may not use song lyrics. I'll talk more about this later. And you may not use the same poems that we discuss in class. And there's a reason for this. We're going to do a lot of the work of interpreting the poetry together, and that's part of what I want you doing in your journal. You can use different poems from the same poet, but you may not use the poems that we talk about together. Your journal can be in any form that pleases you. It can be in a notebook. It can be a handmade book that you create just for these poems. It can be a comb-bound book. We have a binding machine at school that we can use for this. It can be in a folder. It can be in a 3-ring binder. It can be digital. It could be PowerPoint, Keynote, a Word document. Just remember that you will need to be able to turn it in. You need a minimum of 10 poems. If you found the poem online, you have to include the URL where the poem can be found. If it's from a book, you need to cite the source. And you will receive a hard copy of the rubric that I'm going to grade this journal with to glue into your ISN, and I'll also post it in the class. Here's the journal format. On the first page, you're going to include a list of the poems you've chosen to include in your journal. The title, the poet, and the source. And that's your bibliographic citation, whether it's on the internet or whether it's out of a book or a magazine or wherever you found it. Then, from this list of poems, you're going to choose 3 favorite. And this is what you're going to do for each poem. Okay, so you're going to put poem number 1. You're not going to put the poem here. This is just the heading. You're going to give me the title, the poet, and the source, and then you're going to write your response. Remember that it's a minimum of 150 words, and here are some questions to guide you. Okay, why did you like this poem? What does the poem mean to you? What is the poem about? How do you know? Be specific, give reasons and examples to support what you say. Point out something specific in the poem that connects to the elements of poetry. For example, if you found a metaphor, write it down and explain it. Or if there's an image in the poem, show what the image is and how it adds to the meaning of the poem. You're going to do this for your first 3 poems, and you're going to rank order these poems: most favorite, second most favorite, third most favorite. You're going to include a copy of your 3 favorite poems in your journal. The remainder of the unit activities are going to happen in class. Either we're going to watch videos and then discuss them in class during WSQ time, or we're going to work on it during work time each class, but you need to be very careful. It's important for you to stay up with unit activities. Since we're going to be reading poetry first, before we begin going into the writing process, you need to be working on your terms and your poetry journal during work time in class, as well as reading poetry. Remember that for your 20 minutes at home, poetry counts, so you can also do that at home. I know this is a lot of information, and it's important that you be an active viewer for this video. Make sure you pause, rewind, and review if needed. Take good notes. There's a lot of information in this video, and it's important that you're clear about it all. Write a good question in your ISN under the notes, and make sure it's a good question. If you're unclear about something, that would be an excellent question. And then finally, post a summary using the questions from your WSQ chart to guide the content of your paragraph. All right, I want you to think about this. I know that there was a lot of information in this, but this is kind of how we're going to approach our study of poetry and our next guiding question. So think about this, be an active viewer, and I will see you in class.